millionaire in despair upon hearing the last name of the pizza delivery girl, the same as his wife, who passed away 20 years ago. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the luxurious office on the 20th floor of the most prestigious commercial building in Chicago. William Thompson gazed at the city through the panoramic window, his silhouette reflected in the glass, blending with the lights of the evening. His fingers tapped gently on the mahogany desk as he analyzed the spreadsheets from the last quarter of his restaurant chain. The clock showed 9:45 p.m. Another day was ending with William still trapped in his exhausting work routine. Since Elizabeth passed away 5 years ago, he had turned his businesses into his only refuge. Numbers, reports, and meetings filled the void she left, but on that particular night, something felt different. On the wall of his office, a photograph caught his attention more than usual. It was Elizabeth smiling in front of the first restaurant they had opened together nearly 3 decades ago. Her honey-colored eyes seemed even more vibrant in that image, framed by chestnut curls that danced in the wind. "Mr. Thompson?" The voice of Margaret, his secretary, interrupted his thoughts through the intercom. "It's getting late. Aren't you going to have dinner?" William sighed, running his hand through his graying hair. "I'll order something to eat at home, Margaret. You can go." "Are you sure? Chef Michael prepared a special menu today at the Grand." "No, thank you. I need to review these numbers calmly." After turning off the intercom, William meticulously organized his desk as he did every night. He filed the folders in alphabetical order, straightened the photo frames, and made sure his laptop was properly shut down. Organization had always been his safe harbor. At home, silence greeted him like an old friend. The penthouse in Beverly Hills, one of the most upscale neighborhoods in the city, was too spacious for one person. The designer furniture chosen by Elizabeth seemed like mere decorations without her presence. William loosened his tie and picked up his phone. Normally he would have dinner prepared by his housekeeper, but she had taken a few days off to visit her family. His fingers slid across the screen, searching for delivery options. For some inexplicable reason, he decided to do something different from his usual routine. "Pizza," he murmured to himself, surprised by his own choice. He hadn't eaten pizza since he couldn't even remember when. Elizabeth loved pizza, especially the simpler ones with lots of mozzarella and tomato. He found a well-rated place, Napoli Pizzeria, and placed his order. While waiting, William poured himself a glass of red wine. His eyes wandered around the living room until they landed on a small wooden box on the shelf. It was where he kept Elizabeth's letters and a few of her belongings. He had never had the courage to open that box after she left. The doorbell rang exactly 45 minutes later, as promised by the app. William walked to the door, automatically adjusting his wristwatch, a nervous habit he had developed over the years. When he opened the door, time seemed to freeze. There, standing in the hallway with a pizza box in her hands, was a young woman who made his heart skip a beat. The same honey-colored eyes, the same brown curls, even the shy smile was identical. "Good evening, sir. Margarita pizza for apartment 1401. The voice was different, more cheerful, but the tone carried a disconcerting familiarity. William had to lean against the doorframe. His hands trembled slightly as he tried to find the right words. "Are you okay, sir?" asked the delivery girl, her face showing concern. Yes, sorry. What's your name?" "Isabella Martinez, sir." She handed over the pizza, still with a confused expression on her face. William mechanically picked up the box, his eyes fixed on the young woman's face. It was like seeing a ghost. A younger version of Elizabeth materialized at his door. "Here's the payment," he said, handing over some bills. "And keep the change. Thank you so much, sir. Have a good night." Before she turned to leave, William gathered the courage to ask one more question. "Isabella, have you always worked at this pizzeria?" "Just for a few months. I'm saving up for culinary school," she replied with a gentle smile, so much like Elizabeth's that it hurt. "Culinary school," William murmured, feeling his heart race even faster. Elizabeth had also dreamed of culinary school when she was young. After Isabella left, William closed the door and leaned against it, still holding the pizza box. His legs barely supported him. He walked to the couch and placed the pizza on the coffee table, unable to think about eating. His gaze returned to the wooden box on the shelf. For the first time in 5 years, he felt an overwhelming urge to open it. He needed to reread Elizabeth's letters, revisit his memories. Something about that young pizza delivery girl had awakened a dormant intuition in his heart. The night would be long, and William knew he wouldn't be able to sleep, not until he unraveled the mystery behind that extraordinary resemblance. He picked up the wooden box and sat in his favorite armchair, preparing to dive into a past that apparently held more secrets than he had imagined. With trembling hands, William opened the wooden box that held Elizabeth's memories. The soft scent of jasmine, her favorite flower, still lingered on the papers stored inside. The first letter he picked up was yellowed with age, carefully folded, and dated 1985. "Dear Mom," the letter began, written in Elizabeth's delicate handwriting. "I know you won't approve of my decision, but I need to do what I think is best for all of us. She deserves a family that can give her everything I can't provide right now. At 18, with no resources and alone, I'm in no position to raise a child." William felt the air escape his lungs. In 25 years of marriage, Elizabeth had never mentioned a pregnancy in her youth. His hands trembled even more as he continued reading. "Peter doesn't know about the pregnancy, and I prefer to keep it that way. He's about to travel to France to study culinary arts, and I can't be the one to destroy his dreams. The adoption agency assured me she'll go to a good family. I only ask that you keep this secret with me, Mom. One day when I'm ready, maybe I'll be able to tell this story to someone." The letter ended with a tear stain that had slightly smudged the ink. William had to stand up, pacing the room to gather his thoughts. Peter. Could it be Peter Williams? The same man who now ran one of the largest restaurant chains in the country. He returned to the box and found a small diary. The first pages contained old recipes, some cut out from magazines, others handwritten. In the middle of the notebook, he found a photograph that made his heart stop. It was Elizabeth, very young, with a slight bulge in her belly, standing next to a woman he recognized as Cecilia, his former mother-in-law. Cecilia still lived in Chicago, in the same house in Highland Park. If anyone could confirm this story, it would be her. He glanced at the clock. 11:15 p.m. Too late for a visit, but too early to sleep with so many revelations. He continued rummaging through the box and found more letters, all addressed to Elizabeth's mother. In one of them, dated 1986, she wrote about seeing her daughter from afar, in the arms of her new family at a shopping mall. "She's beautiful, Mom. She has my eyes and my hair. I know I made the right choice, but that doesn't make it any easier. Every day I think about her and pray that she's happy and loved." Laura's words echoed in his mind as he recalled Isabella's face. The same age Laura's daughter would be today, the same features, the same passion for gastronomy. It couldn't be a coincidence. William picked up his phone and opened the delivery app. He needed to find more information about Napoli Pizzeria. The establishment was located in the Lincoln Park neighborhood, not too far away. In the photos of the place, he spotted Isabella in some of them, always smiling, either preparing pizzas or serving customers. On his laptop, he researched Peter Williams. The news confirmed that he had studied gastronomy in France between 1985 and 1990, exactly the period mentioned in the letter. Today he owned the Williams Culinary Group, the main competitor to Williams Restaurants in Illinois. The night grew late, but sleep wouldn't come. William continued reading the letters, absorbing every detail, every emotion expressed by Elizabeth. In one of the last letters in the box, written just a few months before her passing, she mentioned a regret. "Sometimes I wonder if I should have told William about her. He was always so understanding, so loving, but the fear of losing his love stopped me. How could I explain that I gave up my own daughter for adoption? How could I talk about Peter? Now I feel like I've carried this secret for too long." The first light of dawn began to appear as William finally put the letters away. His heart was heavy with the revelations, but also filled with a new purpose. He needed to find out if Isabella was truly Elizabeth's daughter, and for that, his first stop would be Cecilia's house. He took a quick shower and changed his clothes. He looked at himself in the mirror, noticing the deep, dark circles that betrayed his sleepless night. It didn't matter. He had waited too long for answers he didn't even know he needed. Before leaving, his eyes landed on the untouched pizza box still on the table. A sad smile played on his lips as he remembered how Elizabeth used to say that coincidences were just the universe whispering its secrets. And now, through a simple pizza delivery, the universe seemed to be shouting. The clock struck 7 in the morning when William parked his car in front of Cecilia's house in the traditional Highland Park neighborhood. The residence still had the same well-kept garden that Elizabeth had so admired, with red roses blooming near the gate. Cecilia was watering the plants when she spotted William. At 75, he still maintained the same elegance and sharpness as always. Her hands froze in midair, holding the watering can, as she noticed the expression on her former son-in-law's face. "William? What are you doing here so early?" "We need to talk, Cecilia, about Elizabeth, and something I discovered last night." The woman's expression changed instantly. She set down the watering can and adjusted her silver hair, a gesture that strongly reminded her of her daughter. "Come in, I'll make some coffee." In the cozy kitchen filled with the scent of homemade bread, Cecilia poured 2 cups of coffee while William laid out the letters he had found on the table. A heavy silence hung between them, broken only by the ticking of the antique clock on the wall. "So you finally found out," Cecilia murmured, her eyes fixed on the letters. "Elizabeth always said that one day the truth would come out. Why did you never tell me?" William's voice trembled slightly. 25 years of marriage, Cecilia. Elizabeth never mentioned a word about having a daughter." Cecilia sighed deeply, her hands gently caressing one of the letters. "Elizabeth was only 18, William. She was practically a child when she met Peter Williams. He was about to leave for France with a culinary scholarship. It was a brief but intense romance. And he never knew about the pregnancy? No. Elizabeth didn't want him to give up his dreams for her. Besides, at that time, my husband was very ill. We didn't have the financial or emotional means to help Elizabeth with a baby." William took a sip of coffee, trying to gather his thoughts. "Last night, a young woman delivered a pizza to my apartment. Cecilia, she looks just like Elizabeth when she was young. The same smile, the same eyes." Cecilia set her cup down abruptly, spilling a few drops on the embroidered tablecloth. "What's her name?" "Isabella Martinez. She works at Napoli Pizzeria and wants to study culinary arts." Cecilia's hands began to tremble. "My God. After Elizabeth passed, I always wondered if we would ever meet her daughter. I kept some photos of her as a baby, before the adoption." "Wait a moment." The lady stood up and quickly left the kitchen. William could hear her footsteps upstairs, drawers opening and closing. When she returned, she carried a small cardboard box. "Here," she said, handing over a yellowed photograph. "This was taken the day Elizabeth gave her up for adoption." William took the photo carefully. A newborn baby slept peacefully, wrapped in a pink blanket. Her few strands of hair already showed the tendency for the curls that were characteristic of Elizabeth. "She cried for weeks," Cecilia continued, her voice choked. "But she was convinced it was the best choice. The adoption agency assured her the baby would go to a stable family, one that could give her everything Elizabeth couldn't offer at the time." "And you never tried to find her afterward?" "Elizabeth searched for a few years, discreetly. She even saw her once by chance at a mall. The girl must have been about 2 years old. But she respected the agreement with the adoptive family to keep her distance." William took his phone out of his pocket and showed a photo from the pizzeria's profile, where Isabella appeared smiling. Cecilia brought her hands to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "It's her, William, I have no doubts. It's like seeing Elizabeth again. I need your help, Cecilia. I want to find a way to tell Isabella the truth, but I don't know how to do it without scaring her. And there's more. She works at a pizzeria that's struggling financially. Elizabeth always said that destiny has its own plans," Cecilia remarked, wiping away her tears. "It's no coincidence this girl has come to you, especially through the culinary world." "I'll go back to the pizzeria tonight," William decided. "I need to get to know her better, understand her life, before making any revelations." Cecilia held William's hand tightly. "Take it slow, please. This truth could completely change her life. And William, Peter Williams is still a major figure in the culinary industry. How are you going to handle that?" "One step at a time," he replied, carefully putting away the photos. "First, I need to build a connection with Isabella. We'll figure out the rest later." As he said goodbye to Cecilia, William carried not only the old photos, but also the weight of an immense responsibility. He needed to find a way to honor Elizabeth's legacy, while protecting Isabella from the impact this revelation could have on her life. The following night, Napoli Pizzeria was bustling. The small establishment, with its walls adorned with photos of Naples and the tempting aromas of fresh dough and tomato sauce, overflowed with life and lively conversations. William watched from outside, sitting in his car for nearly half an hour. He had ordered a margarita pizza through the app again, specifying that he wanted Isabella to make the delivery. But at the last moment, he decided to go to the pizzeria in person. As he entered, his eyes immediately found Isabella. She was in the open kitchen, focused as she prepared a pizza, her movements precise as she stretched the dough in the air. The same gentle smile that Elizabeth had lit up her face as she worked. "Can I help you?" A waitress approached. "Actually, I placed an order through the app, but I decided to come in person." William showed the receipt on his phone. "Would it be possible for me to sit and eat here?" "Of course. Feel free to choose a table. I'll let the kitchen know not to prepare your order for delivery." William chose a table with a view of the open kitchen. From there, he could watch Isabella interacting with the other staff. She seemed to be well liked by everyone, exchanging smiles and kind words as she coordinated orders. "Mr. Thompson." Isabella recognized him, approaching with his pizza. "What a surprise. I thought you'd be having it delivered to your apartment again." "I decided to check out the place. Your pizza from yesterday made me curious about the restaurant. I hope you enjoy this one too." "I made sure to prepare it personally when I saw your name on the order." William looked at the pizza in front of him. The thin crust, the vibrant red sauce, the perfectly melted mozzarella. It was exactly how Elizabeth used to describe the pizzas she ate in her youth. "Have you always worked in the culinary field?" he asked, trying to keep the conversation casual. "Actually, I started not too long ago. I've always loved cooking, but my adoptive family couldn't afford to pay for culinary school." Isabella paused, as if she had said too much. "Sorry, I don't know why I'm sharing this." "Don't apologize. It's interesting to hear your story. You said you want to study culinary arts, right?" "Yes, I'm saving up for it. I work here at night, and during the day I do some freelance catering jobs." At that moment, an elderly gentleman approached the table. "Isabella, we need you in the kitchen. The orders are piling up." "I'm coming, Mr. Joseph." She turned to William. "I have to go. I hope you enjoy the pizza." William watched as she headed back to the kitchen. Mr. Joseph, who he assumed was the owner of the pizzeria, seemed worried as he checked some bills at the register. The pizza was delicious, but William could barely focus on the taste. His mind was busy analyzing every detail he had discovered about Isabella. Adoptive family, passion for culinary arts, that smile identical to Elizabeth's. Each new piece of information confirmed his suspicions. When he finished eating, he asked to speak with Mr. Joseph. The man approached, wiping his hands on his apron. "How can I help you?" "I'm William Thompson, owner of the Thompson Restaurants chain. I'd like to discuss a potential partnership." Mr. Joseph's eyes widened. "William Thompson? You're a legend in the culinary scene of Illinois. I noticed you have a very talented young woman working here. Isabella has the potential to go far in the culinary world." "Ah, yes. Isabella is an angel. She saved my establishment when my old pizzaiolo left. But honestly, we're going through tough times. The competition from big restaurants, the delivery apps charging high fees. What if I could help?" William proposed, choosing his words carefully. "I'm thinking of expanding my chain to include an authentic pizzeria. We could discuss a partnership." Mr. Joseph blinked several times, incredulous. "Are you serious?" "Completely, but I have one condition. I want Isabella to be a key part of the project. We'll pay for her culinary school and she can develop her talent with us." That would be a dream," Mr. Joseph stammered, "but I need to be honest. Our numbers aren't good. Leave that to me. Can we schedule a meeting tomorrow to discuss the details?" As he finalized the meeting details with Mr. Joseph, William watched Isabella one last time that night. She kept working, unaware of the conversation that could change her life. In her face, William saw not only the reflection of Elizabeth, but also a bright future that needed to be nurtured carefully. The meeting room at the headquarters of Thompson Restaurants was intimidating with its sophisticated decor. Mr. Joseph nervously adjusted his tie as he gazed at the pictures on the walls, photos of the most famous restaurants in the chain. Elizabeth, seated beside him, maintained a serene posture, though her restless hands betrayed her anxiety. Margaret, William's secretary, served coffee to everyone present. Besides Mr. Joseph and Elizabeth, Richard Peterson, the executive manager of the chain, was also attending the meeting. His critical gaze assessed the visitors with a hint of disdain. "Well, shall we begin?" William suggested, opening a folder with documents. Mr. Joseph, I've brought an initial proposal for us to discuss. Richard cleared his throat, interrupting. Mr. Thompson, with all due respect, I don't think it's wise to associate our brand with a neighborhood pizzeria. Our chain is known for high-end cuisine. That's exactly why, Richard, William replied firmly. We need to innovate. Napoli Pizzeria has something that's not easily found: authenticity. Elizabeth watched the interaction closely, her eyes revealing a mix of surprise and curiosity. William noticed how she subtly leaned forward when the topic turned to cuisine, just as Laura used to do. Our proposal is clear, William continued. We want to preserve the essence of Napoli Pizzeria, but modernize its management and expand its reach. And more importantly, invest in developing new talent. At this moment, he looked directly at Elizabeth. Ms. Martinez, I heard you're interested in studying culinary arts. Yes, sir, she replied, her voice steady despite her nerves. It's been my dream since I was a child. Our proposal includes a full scholarship for your studies, as well as a specific training program within our chain. Richard discreetly scoffed, but Augusto ignored him. Mr. Joseph, on the other hand, smiled with emotion. In exchange, Augusto continued, we want you to lead the revamp of Napoli Pizzeria's menu, blending Italian tradition with touches of Illinois cuisine. This is extraordinary, Isabella replied, her eyes shining. But why me? There are far more experienced professionals. Augusto felt his heart tighten. How could he explain that every gesture of hers reminded him of Elizabeth? That her passion for cuisine seemed like an echo of the past. Because I recognize talent when I see it, he replied simply. Your margarita pizza made me remember flavors I hadn't experienced in a long time. Richard interrupted again. Mr. Thompson, we need to consider the risks. A common pizzeria could tarnish our reputation. No food made with love is common, Richard, Isabella responded, surprising everyone. Every pizza I make carries stories and traditions. It's not just dough, sauce, and cheese. Augusto smiled, proud. It was exactly what Elizabeth would have said. I fully agree, he said. Mr. Joseph, if you're on board, we can start implementing the changes gradually as early as next week. The pizzeria owner nodded energetically. It would be an honor, Mr. Thompson, but... He hesitated, glancing at Isabella. The final decision must be hers. It's her future that's at stake. All eyes turned to the young woman. Isabella took a deep breath, her fingers drumming softly on the table, another gesture that reminded everyone of Elizabeth. I have just one condition, she said. I want to keep the current staff at the pizzeria. They're like family to me. Absolutely not, Richard protested. We need qualified professionals. I agree with Ms. Martinez, William interrupted. The soul of a restaurant lies in its team. We'll train everyone properly. The meeting continued with discussions about technical and financial details. Richard kept raising objections, but William stood firm in his decisions. He observed how Isabella actively participated in the discussions, demonstrating a natural understanding of the business. At the end, when everyone had left, William remained in his office, gazing at a photo of Elizabeth on the wall. He was certain she would approve of his decision to help Isabella, even though he still couldn't reveal the truth. Margaret entered with another cup of coffee. The girl reminds me of someone, she commented casually. I can't quite place who... Yes, William replied softly. She reminds me very much of someone special. Alone again, he opened his planner and made a note. Call Cecilia. He needed to share the latest developments and, most importantly, ask for advice on how to proceed. Fate had brought Isabella into his path, but now he needed to act wisely to avoid ruining this second chance to be part of Elizabeth's daughter's life. The first week after signing the partnership brought significant changes to Napoli Pizzeria. Isabella watched the renovations with a mix of excitement and apprehension as technical teams installed new equipment in the kitchen and designers refreshed the dining room decor. Keeping the Italian essence but with touches of Illinois, the designer explained, showing panels that depicted both landscapes of Tuscany and historic mansions of Charleston. On that particular morning, Isabella arrived early to test new recipes. She found William already in the kitchen, carefully examining an old photograph. Mr. Thompson, I didn't expect to find you here so early. William quickly tucked the photo into his jacket pocket. It was a picture of Elizabeth in her first professional kitchen, but Isabella couldn't see it. Not yet. I came to see how you're adjusting to the changes, he replied. And please, call me William. Isabella smiled, adjusting her new chef's uniform. It all feels so surreal. Sometimes I wake up thinking it was just a dream. You deserve every opportunity, William said, watching her organize her ingredients. What are you planning to make today? I've been thinking about a fusion, a pizza with aged Illinois cheese, artisanal sausage and crispy kale. I want to combine Neapolitan technique with flavors from Illinois. William's eyes lit up. Elizabeth also loved experimenting with unusual combinations. He remembered when she created a cassava gnocchi that became famous in her restaurants. May I observe your process? Of course. Actually, I'd like your opinion on something. Isabella hesitated briefly. I found an old recipe notebook in the pizzeria's archive. Some notes intrigued me. She pulled a yellowed notebook from her bag. William felt his heart race as he recognized the handwriting. It was one of Elizabeth's notebooks, which he had discreetly left at the pizzeria days before. Look at this sauce recipe, Isabella pointed out excitedly. The technique is unlike anything I've ever seen. And there's this note in the margin. The secret lies in the cooking time of the herbs. William recognized it immediately. It was the special sauce Elizabeth had developed in her early years as a chef. Why don't we try making it? Over the next few hours, William watched Isabella work, noticing how her movements in the kitchen were identical to Elizabeth's. The way she tasted the sauce, adjusted the seasoning, even the way she cleaned the counter between tasks. You know, Isabella commented as the sauce simmered, I've always felt a special connection to the kitchen. My adoptive mother used to say I was born with it in my blood. William held back his emotions. Some people are born with that gift. It's funny. Ever since you showed up at the pizzeria, I've been thinking a lot about my origins. She paused, stirring the sauce. I never met my biological parents. Sometimes I wonder if they loved cooking too. The moment was interrupted by Richard, who abruptly entered the kitchen. Mr. Thompson, we need your signature on some urgent documents. Leave them on my desk, Richard. I'm busy right now. But sir, these are important contracts, the manager insisted, casting a critical glance at the experimental kitchen. I said I'll look at them later, William replied firmly. After Richard left reluctantly, Isabella tasted the finished sauce. Her eyes widened in surprise. It's amazing. There's something familiar about this flavor. She offered a taste to William, who felt tears forming in the corners of his eyes. It was exactly the flavor Elizabeth had created. You have a natural talent, he commented, masking his emotion. At that moment, Mr. Joseph entered the kitchen with a worried expression. Isabella, there's someone here to speak with you. They said it's important. At the kitchen door, a tall and elegant man was waiting. William recognized him immediately. Peter Williams. Ms. Martinez? Peter approached, smiling. I'm Peter Williams. I heard about the partnership with Thompson Restaurants and came personally to meet the young chef everyone is talking about. William felt his blood run cold. How had Peter found out about Isabella? He watched intently as the businessman spoke with the young woman, searching for signs of recognition on her face. Did he suspect something? The unexpected encounter marked the beginning of a new chapter in the story. William knew he would need to act quickly. Peter Williams' presence complicated everything, and the time to reveal the truth to Isabella was running out. Peter Williams' unexpected visit to Napoli Pizzeria triggered a series of events William had not foreseen. In the following days, the businessman returned several times, always praising Isabella's creations and sharing stories about his experiences in France. You know, Isabella, Peter remarked as he tasted her latest creation, a pizza with zucchini blossoms and cheese from the Blue Ridge Mountains. You remind me a lot of someone I knew many years ago. She had the same sparkle in her eyes when she talked about gastronomy. William, who was watching the scene from afar, felt his stomach churn. The way Peter looked at Isabella suggested that he too had noticed the resemblance to Elizabeth. It was only a matter of time before the pieces fell into place. Mr. Williams, Isabella replied, it's an honor to receive your praise. I've read a lot about your journey in the specialized magazines. Please, call me Peter. Actually, I came to extend an invitation to you. I'm organizing a culinary festival next month, bringing together the biggest names in Illinois cuisine. I would love for you to participate. Isabella's eyes sparkled with excitement. Me? But I'm just an apprentice. An apprentice with natural talent, Peter smiled, giving William a meaningful look. Besides, I would love to see you compete in the Young Talents category. That night, after closing the pizzeria, William found Isabella in the kitchen, organizing her notes. On the counter, Elizabeth's recipe notebook was open. "Have you decided if you're going to participate in the festival?" he asked, sitting down next to her. "I'm still thinking about it. It's an incredible opportunity, but..." She hesitated, flipping through the notebook. "There's something strange. Mr. William seems so interested in me, almost as if what? As if he knew me from somewhere." Isabella closed the notebook. "And there's more. I found this between the pages." She showed an old, partially faded photo. In it, a young Elizabeth smiled next to Peter Williams, both wearing kitchen uniforms. William recognized the image. It was from the time they dated before Peter left for France. "That woman," Isabella murmured. "She looks so much like me." Augusto felt his heart race. The moment he had feared had come sooner than expected. "Isabella, we need to talk about something important." At that moment, Margaret hurried into the kitchen. "Mr. Thompson, sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation. Richard is in the meeting room with union representatives. It seems he's made allegations about irregularities in the hiring of the pizzeria staff." Augusto cursed under his breath. Richard was determined to cause trouble for the project. "Go," Isabella said softly. "We can talk later." The next day, Peter returned to the pizzeria, this time with a folder of documents. Augusto watched him from his table as he spoke with Isabella. "I brought some old photos," Peter explained, "from when I started my career. I thought you might like to see what culinary life in Illinois was like back then." Isabella flipped through the photos with interest, stopping at a specific one. It was Elizabeth again, younger, with a slight bulge in her belly that her apron barely concealed. "This woman," Isabella began, her voice trembling slightly. "She appears in several photos. Who is she?" Peter took the photo carefully, his eyes welling up. "Elizabeth Moreira, a talented chef I met early in my career. She passed away a few years ago." "And did she work in your restaurants?" "No," Peter replied, looking directly at William. "Actually, she married William Thompson, but before that He paused, as if weighing his next words. William stood up abruptly. He couldn't let Peter reveal the truth like that. Not there, not like that. "Elizabeth," he called, approaching her. "That conversation we started yesterday, I think it's time to continue it." Peter watched them intently. In his eyes, a mix of understanding and astonishment began to form. He too was piecing together the puzzle. "Mr. Thompson," Elizabeth said, her voice steady despite the evident confusion on her face, "why are you both looking at me like that? What's going on?" The moment was interrupted by the sound of glass breaking in the kitchen, followed by heated shouts. Richard was arguing with Mr. Joseph, threatening to call the health inspector. "We need to deal with this first," William said, frustrated. "But I promise we'll have an honest conversation afterward. About everything." As he headed to the kitchen to break up the argument, William realized he could no longer delay the truth. The past was about to come to light whether he was ready or not. The tension at Napoli Pizzeria reached its peak that night. After calming the tempers between Richard and Mr. Joseph, William found Elizabeth sitting on the back stairs of the restaurant, still holding the old photographs. "Did you know?" she asked as soon as she saw him. "About Elizabeth Moreira." William sat down beside her, gazing at the starry sky over Chicago. "Yes, Elizabeth was my wife." "And why didn't you tell me before? Why all this mystery?" "Because the story is more complicated than it seems." William pulled out the letter Elizabeth had written to her mother so many years ago. "I think it's time for you to read this." Isabella took the letter with trembling hands. Her eyes raced across the lines, her expression gradually shifting from confusion to shock. This means that she..." Isabella couldn't finish the sentence. "Yes," William replied softly. "Elizabeth was your biological mother." The silence that followed was deafening. Tears streamed down Isabella's face as she reread the letter several times. "Is that why Mr. Williams has been around so much? Does he know?" "I believe he's starting to suspect. Peter is your biological father, Isabella, but he never knew about the pregnancy. Elizabeth chose not to tell him when he went to study in France." Isabella stood up abruptly, pacing back and forth. "So this whole project, the partnership with the pizzeria. Was it all just because of this? Out of pity? No, William responded firmly. It was because of your talent. You are extraordinary in the kitchen, just like Elizabeth was. The resemblance between you two was what made me investigate, but your worth goes far beyond that. At that moment, the back door opened. Peter was standing there, holding more photographs. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, he said. But I think I also have something to say. Isabella looked at the two men, her emotions in turmoil. I need some time. It's too much to process. She started to walk away, but stopped when she heard Cecilia's voice, who had just arrived. Dear, the woman called softly, I know it's a lot to take in, but there's something you need to see. Cecilia was carrying an old box, decorated with floral patterns. These are Elizabeth's original recipes. All her notes from her teenage years until the end. She always said that a person's soul is in their recipes. Isabella hesitated but eventually took the box. As she opened it, she found dozens of notebooks, all filled with the delicate handwriting she already recognized from the pizzeria's notebook. There's a special recipe, Cecilia continued, flipping through one of the notebooks. A pizza she created when she was pregnant. She said it was her way of connecting her two passions, Italian cuisine and the flavors of Illinois. Isabella's hands trembled as she read the recipe. Thin Neapolitan crust, roasted tomato sauce with ora pro nobis, half-cured Illinois cheese. Her voice faltered. It's almost identical to the recipe I created last week. The talent runs in the blood, Peter commented, emotional. Elizabeth was one of a kind in the kitchen, always innovating, always blending different traditions. William watched the scene with a heavy heart. 3 generations united by gastronomy, by the love of cooking, by flavors that transcended time. I don't expect you to accept us into your life right away, he said to Isabella. But I want you to know that Elizabeth dreamed of reuniting with you one day. She kept every achievement of yours she could find over the years. Isabella hugged the recipe box to her chest. I need time to process all of this, but... She hesitated, looking at the notebooks. Can I keep the recipes? They're rightfully yours, Cecilia replied, embracing her. Elizabeth would have wanted you to have them. That night, after everyone had left, Isabella stayed in the pizzeria's kitchen, testing the recipe of her biological mother. Every ingredient, every technique described in the notebooks seemed to tell a story, revealing a piece of the past she had never known. William watched her discreetly, remembering how Elizabeth used to say that the kitchen was the place where all stories came together, where the past and present blended like ingredients in a perfect recipe. The truth had finally been revealed, but now the real challenge began. Building new bonds, healing old wounds, and perhaps creating a new family, united by the love of gastronomy and Elizabeth's legacy. The days following the revelation were intense at Napoli Pizzeria. Isabella dove headfirst into Elizabeth's recipes, testing each one, discovering the notes in the margins of the notebooks, trying to understand the woman who had given her life through her dishes. She used to make these little marks next to the recipes she loved the most, explained Cecilia, who spent more and more time at the pizzeria. 3 little stars meant the dish was special to her. Isabella smiled as she noticed the 3 stars next to the recipe she was preparing, cassava gnocchi with Blue Ridge Mountains cheese sauce. I'll include some of her dishes in the new menu, Isabella decided. It's a way to keep her memory alive. Marina Turner, the newly hired sommelier for the pizzeria's new phase, watched Isabella with admiration as she worked. You have the same sparkle in your eyes that she had in the photos when she was cooking. Marina's presence had become a constant comfort for Isabella. Besides helping her pair wines with new creations, the sommelier brought a much-needed lightness to those emotionally charged days. The culinary festival is in 2 weeks, Marina remarked, tasting the gnocchi. Have you decided what you're going to present? Isabella looked at the notebooks scattered across the counter. I want to create something new, but using her techniques as a foundation, a way to unite the past and the present. Peter Williams appeared at the kitchen door, carrying an old bottle of wine. I brought something special, he announced. It's from the 1985 vintage, the year I met Elizabeth. Peter's attempts to connect were subtle and respectful. He shared stories about the beginning of his career, about how Elizabeth inspired him to pursue his dreams in France, always leaving Isabella free to decide the level of closeness she desired. She had a unique way of preparing sauces, Peter commented, watching Isabella work. She always said the secret was in the cooking time of the herbs. I found that technique in her notebooks, Isabella replied, showing a specific page. I've been testing variations. William, who was observing the scene from the doorway, felt his heart warm. It was like seeing Elizabeth again, sharing her passion for gastronomy. However, not everything was perfect. Richard continued to create obstacles, now questioning the legitimacy of the culinary heritage Isabella was claiming. Recipes aren't intellectual property, he argued during a meeting. We can't base our entire new menu on old notes. It's not just about recipes, Richard, William responded firmly. It's a family legacy, and more importantly, Isabella is creating her own interpretations. The tension was interrupted by Mr. Joseph, who entered the meeting room excitedly. You need to see this. The line to try the new menu is wrapping around the block. Indeed, Napoli Pizzeria was undergoing a transformation. The walls now displayed old photos of Elizabeth alongside the contemporary creations of Isabella. Each dish told a story, a connection between mother and daughter that transcended time. One night, after the restaurant had closed, Isabella found Marina alone in the cellar organizing the wines. Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing the right thing, Isabella confessed, exposing so much of her history, of our history. Marina stopped what she was doing and approached her. Elizabeth seemed like the kind of person who believed that food is about sharing, not just flavors, but also memories and emotions. It's strange. I never knew her, but through these recipes, I feel like she's always been a part of my life. Because you are a part of her, Marina replied softly, her gaze meeting Isabella's. Every dish you create carries a piece of that connection. The moment was interrupted by Cecilia, who brought in another box of keepsakes. I found something you need to see, she said, pulling out an old video. It's Elizabeth giving an interview about Illinois cuisine. I thought you'd like to hear her voice. That night, gathered in the makeshift projection room at the back of the pizzeria, Isabella, William, Peter, Marina, and Cecilia watched together as the footage of Elizabeth explaining her philosophy in the kitchen played. Cooking is an act of love, she said in the video. Every dish tells a story, carries memories, and brings people together. True cuisine isn't just about technique, it's about the heart we put into every preparation. Isabella cried silently, finally feeling like she had found her place, her history, her true essence. There, among pots and recipe notebooks, among wines and memories, she began to understand the true meaning of family. The Illinois Culinary Festival was fast approaching. Isabella spent hours in Napoli Pizzeria's experimental kitchen, refining her creation for the competition. At the center of her workstation, one of Elizabeth's notebooks remained open, a constant source of inspiration. It's not just a competition for me, she explained to Marina, who accompanied her during her late-night experiments. It's a way to honor her legacy. The dish Isabella developed was a bold fusion. A pizza with dough naturally fermented for 48 hours, topped with organic tomato sauce from Asheville, artisanal cheese from the Blue Ridge Mountains, smoked free-range pork sausage, and ora pro nobis sprouts. The foundation of the recipe came from Elizabeth's notebooks, but each element carried Isabella's personal touch. It's like a conversation between generations, Peter remarked after tasting the creation. I can feel Elizabeth's influence, but her personality is present in every detail. The closeness with Peter grew naturally. He shared stories about his years in France, about how Elizabeth encouraged him to follow his dreams, even if it meant being apart. She always knew I needed to leave, he said one evening. But I never imagined there was so much more to our story. William watched this growing bond with mixed emotions. On one hand, he was happy that Isabella was connecting with her roots. On the other, a pang of jealousy bothered him, even though he tried not to show it. She needs this connection to the past, Cecilia gently reminded him, and you will always be a fundamental part of her story, William. You were the one who found her, who created this opportunity. The day of the festival arrived with great anticipation. Napoli Pizzeria closed exceptionally, so the entire team could support Isabella in the competition. Even Richard, who was gradually beginning to accept the changes, was present. On the main stage of the event, Isabella prepared her pizza in front of a renowned jury. Her hands moved with confidence, replicating gestures she had unknowingly inherited from Elizabeth. In the front row, William, Peter, Cecilia, and Marina watched proudly. The participants had to present a dish that represented the essence of Illinois cuisine, the announcer declared, and our next competitor brings a special story. Isabella took a deep breath before beginning her presentation. This dish is a tribute to Elizabeth Moreira, a chef who inspired generations and who, as I recently discovered, was my biological mother. Through her recipes, I was able to get to know her and understand that the love for gastronomy runs in our veins. In the audience, Cecilia discreetly wiped away tears, while Peter and William exchanged emotional glances. Marina, who had held Isabella's hand minutes earlier, smiled proudly. The aroma of the pizza filled the auditorium as Isabella explained each element, each technique, each story behind the chosen ingredients. When the jury tasted the dish, the silence was absolute. "Extraordinary," declared the head chef of the jury. "The dough has its own personality. The flavors complement each other perfectly, and each element tells a story. It's refined technique with the soul of Illinois." Isabella's victory in the Young Talent category was celebrated with emotion by everyone. But the true prize came after the ceremony, when a group of investors approached William with a proposal. "We want to open a restaurant based on the concept Isabella developed," they explained. "A place that combines Italian tradition with the cuisine of Illinois." William looked over at Isabella, who was chatting animatedly with Marina in a corner of the hall. "The decision is hers," he replied. "It always has been." That night, after the celebration, Isabella found a moment of quiet in the kitchen of Napoli Pizzeria. She was flipping through Elizabeth's notebooks when Marina joined her. "You know what's most amazing?" Isabella commented, pointing to a specific page. She wrote here that she dreamed of creating a place that was more than just a restaurant, a space where people could connect through food, where stories could be told through flavors. Marina smiled, stepping closer. "Exactly like what you do here." The look they exchanged was filled with meaning. Marina gently held Isabella's hand, and in that moment both knew something special was being born, something as natural as the yeast that makes dough rise. "I think I've found my place," Isabella whispered. "Not just in the culinary world, but in life." Napoli Pizzeria was silent at that hour, but the walls seemed to hold all the secrets, all the stories, all the love that had blossomed there. It was more than a restaurant. It was a place where past and present met, where a daughter rediscovered her mother through old recipes, and where new dreams began to take shape. The investors' proposal to open a new restaurant sparked a wave of changes in Isabella's life. Meetings followed one after another in William's office, where architectural blueprints and decor plans mixed with menu tastings and wine pairings. "The space in Beverly Hills is perfect," the architect explained, showing the plans for a historic mansion. "We can keep the original structure, just adapting it to accommodate a professional kitchen." Isabella listened carefully, but her gaze always returned to Elizabeth's notebooks scattered across the table. In their yellowed pages, she found inspiration for every decision. "I want to preserve the essence of Napoli Pizzeria," she explained during one of the meetings, "but also create something new, something that represents my own journey." Marina, who was now actively involved in the project as head sommelier, supported every choice Isabella made. Her constant presence and caring gaze made the long meetings feel lighter. "We can create a wine list that tells the story of the restaurant," Marina suggested. "Traditional Italian labels alongside award-winning wines from Illinois. A fusion, just like your cuisine." The relationship between the two blossomed naturally, like well-risen dough. Small gestures, a coffee left on the counter on testing mornings, a hand offering support in moments of doubt, smiles exchanged over glasses of wine, built something special. Peter and William, overcoming old rivalries, became complementary mentors for Isabella. While Peter shared his international experiences and connections in the culinary world, William offered practical advice on management and leadership. "Your mom always said that a restaurant is like an orchestra," William remarked one evening, watching Isabella organize her team. "Each person has their instrument, their part in the melody. The secret is getting everyone to play in harmony." Richard's transformation also surprised everyone. After witnessing Isabella's success at the festival and the growing popularity of Napoli Pizzeria, he gradually let go of his resistance. "I need to admit I was wrong," he confessed during a meeting. "Your innovations have brought new life to the entire network." One afternoon, while finalizing the details of the new restaurant, Isabella found a special note in Laura's notebooks. It was an unrealized project, a dream of creating a space that combined gastronomy and education. She wanted to open a cooking school within the restaurant, Isabella told Cecilia, emotional. To pass on knowledge, techniques, stories. Your mom always believed that gastronomy was a form of love, Cecilia replied, hugging her granddaughter. And that love only exists when it's shared. Inspired by this discovery, Isabella revised the original plan. Part of the mansion would be dedicated to cooking classes, focusing on traditional techniques from Illinois and Italy. It's perfect, Marina said, hugging Isabella from behind as she showed the changes to the plan. This way, you can fulfill not only your dreams but hers too. News of the expansion reached the local papers. Soon, Isabella's story, the young chef who discovered her roots through gastronomy, gained attention in the specialized media. I don't want the focus to be on the personal aspect, she insisted when a major magazine requested an interview. What matters is the food, the recipes, the revival of traditions. Yet it was impossible to separate her personal story from her professional journey. Every dish she created carried a piece of her discovery, her growth, her understanding of family and belonging. One evening, after a long session of testing in the experimental kitchen, Isabella found William alone, gazing at a photo of Elizabeth. Sometimes I wonder if she ever imagined all of this would happen, he commented softly. I think she knew, Isabella replied, showing a specific page from the recipe notebook. Look at this. In the margin of a pizza recipe, Elizabeth had written, "One day, perhaps, someone will continue this story. And when that day comes, every flavor will be a reunion." William smiled, moved. She always believed in the power of food to bring people together, to heal wounds, to build bridges. And she was right, Isabella concluded, glancing through the window at Marina, who was animatedly chatting with Peter about American wines. Food brought me back home even when I didn't know I was searching for it. The historic mansion in the Beverly Hills neighborhood was finally ready for its grand opening. The century-old walls now housed a modern kitchen, but retained their original elegance. Photographs of Elizabeth from different moments in her career adorned the rooms, silently telling the story that connected past and present. Laura's house, the name Isabella had chosen for her restaurant, gleamed in golden letters on the restored facade. The space was exactly as she had dreamed, warm and sophisticated at the same time, with areas dedicated to both dining and culinary education. On the opening night, the dining room was filled with special guests. Cecilia, elegant in her blue dress, welcomed visitors with her usual grace. Peter and William, now friends united by their love for gastronomy, and Isabella chatted animatedly about the wines selected by Marina. The sommelier, impeccable in her custom uniform, presented the wine list she had created especially for the house. Each label told a story. Each pairing represented a chapter of the journey that had brought them there. This Illinois wine, Marina explained to a group of guests, pairs perfectly with our Highland Park cheese pizza with locally sourced mushrooms. It's the perfect union of Italian tradition and local flavors. In the kitchen, Isabella led her team with the same passion and precision she had inherited from Elizabeth. Mr. Joseph, now a special consultant for the restaurant, watched proudly as his former employee became a respected chef. "I remember the day you started at Napoli Pizzeria," he remarked, emotional. "Who would have thought that young pizza delivery girl would go so far?" The opening menu was a tribute to Isabella's journey of discovery. Each dish told a part of her story. The margherita pizza that led her to William, the cassava gnocchi that won the festival, and several recipes rescued from Elizabeth's notebooks, all with contemporary touches that reflected Isabella's personality. Richard, who had surprisingly become one of the project's biggest supporters, efficiently coordinated the dining room service. Her transformation was a testament to how time and dedication could change perspectives. In the middle of the night, Isabella asked for a moment of attention from the guests. By her side, Marina held her hand, offering silent support. "This place is more than a restaurant," Isabella began, her voice choked with emotion. "It's the realization of many dreams, mine, Elizabeth's, and all the people who helped us get here." She paused, looking at every important face in her life. "Through gastronomy, I discovered my roots, found my family, and learned that love comes in many forms and flavors. Every dish we serve here carries a piece of that story. William and Peter approached, each carrying a glass of wine. Cecilia followed, bringing one of Elizabeth's old notebooks. "We found something special," Cecilia announced, opening the notebook. The last entry Elizabeth made, just a few weeks before she passed. On the yellowed page, in the delicate handwriting everyone knew so well, it read, "The true recipe for happiness isn't in the ingredients or the techniques, but in the people we share our table with. Love is the most important seasoning, and we should never skimp on it." Marina hugged Isabella, who couldn't hold back her tears. Peter raised his glass, proposing a toast to Elizabeth, who taught us that family isn't just about blood but about love and choices. "And to the future," William added, smiling at the couple. "May Laura's house be a place where new stories can begin." That night, as the guests celebrated, Isabella watched her family gathered, not just the biological one, but everyone fate had placed in her path. Marina by her side, her partner in life and in wine. William and Peter, who had overcome rivalries to become pillars in her life. Cecilia, the living link to Elizabeth. Mr. Joseph, Richard, and the entire team who believed in her vision. And in every detail of the restaurant, in every recipe on the menu, in every carefully selected bottle of wine, Elizabeth's spirit was present. Her story hadn't ended. It lived on through every dish prepared with love, through every person who sat at the table to share not just a meal, but a piece of this extraordinary story of rediscovery and new beginnings. Laura's house wasn't just a restaurant. It was a testament to how love, like the finest wines, only improves with time. And there, among aromas and flavors, laughter and tears past and present, Isabella finally found her place in the world, not just as a chef, but as the guardian of a legacy of love that would continue to nourish hearts and souls for generations.